Welcome to Marty Bakers. In this channel, we'll be featuring cakes, recipes, avoidable baking mistake. Today, we want to talk about flour. Now, when you look at my layout, you will notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all this flour, we will learn what role each one play and where we can use certain flour for a certain individual. Now, flour is probably the most common commodity in our daily use. It forms the foundation of bread, pastry, and cakes, and is one of the most important ingredients. There are a great variety of high quality flours made from cereals, nuts, or legumes such as chestnut flour and corn flour. Now, someone may ask me, why are we discussing flour? One thing, the reason why we are discussing flour is that in the world we live in today, you find a percentage in a country. This percentage, it can be 1% or 2%, and these people are gluten intolerant. Now, if they are gluten intolerant, we need to know what kind of flour we will use when we are baking for them. Another point is that many people nowadays are inclined to eating healthy. Now, because an average of people want to eat healthy, we knowing what kind of flour we will use will be able to serve them better. Another point is that in the world we live in today, many people have different kinds of allergies or different kinds of condition that we have to cater for them. As bakers, we cannot choose who to bake for and not. And because of that, we need to know what kind of flour we need to use for our clients. So we have seen that knowing what kind of flour to use will be able to help our clients better. Now, as you look at my table, you'll notice we have 5 types of flour, and each flour play a role. Now, our first flour is wheat flour. Now, when you notice wheat flour, it's even indicated on the flour itself. Now, wheat flour, did you know that wheat flour is 72 to 85% of whole grain? Now, this flour, when you look at it, you notice it is white in color. Now, most of the time, we use this flour when we are baking, when you're making mandazi or when you're making our pastry. And especially as Kenyans, we like it when we are making our nice brown chapatis. So you'll find that this flour, many people will use it. They don't have any condition, so it's okay for them to use that flour. Our second flour is, it's written whole wheat flour. Whole wheat flour. This flour is 100% whole grain. 100% whole grain. Now, one thing with this flour is that you will use it for people who have a stomach lining. Now, what normally happens is that someone goes to the doctor and the doctor say that your stomach wall is weak. Now, that what might cause that is that sometimes you're chewing and you're not eating anything. When you're chewing, you are preparing your stomach to eat. So, because you chew and you don't eat, now you produce a lot of acid in your body. Now, when you produce a lot of acid in your body and you don't take vegetables in your diet, then the probability of you developing your stomach lining problem is very high. So These kind of people, when they have a problem with their stomach lining, the doctors always recommend they use 100% whole wheat flour to strengthen their stomach wall. So this is actually what is used for people who have problem with their stomach lining. So you've seen that the first flour and the second flour are very different, although they are still flour. Now our third flour is wholemeal flour. Now wholemeal flour, this flour is 85 to 95% of whole grain. Now, one thing with this flour, when you look at it closely, you will notice it is not smooth. It has some brown flakes inside. And when it's grinded, it's not grinded smooth as compared to the two flour that I mentioned earlier. No, this is very different. Now, this flour, mostly it is used for people who suffer from diabetes. Now, when someone comes to your shop and they are diabetic, it's always good to use this flour. And as you've noticed that this flour is used for people who suffer from diabetes. So when they come and they order a cake, we make sure we use this flour so that they can have a good health. And like they always say, your wealth is your health. So we've seen that each flour used for a different purpose. Our fourth flour is self-raising flour. Now, self-raising flour is different from the three that I had just mentioned. One thing with self-raising flour is that, yes, it's under wheat flour. However, it has a baking powder inside or a raising agent inside. So when you are baking, you do not need to put baking powder or any raising agent. All you do is that you weigh it and then you use it. Now, when you look at this flour closely, you will notice that it's just the same as the first one, which is under wheat flour. But the difference is that it has baking powder inside. So you've seen that all this flour play a role when it comes to baking. And each one has a specific people to use for. Our last flour is gluten-free flour. Now, gluten-free flour is very different from the four flours that I have just mentioned to you. Now, one thing with gluten-free flour is that it is gluten-free. It does not contain any wheat or any protein that is found in these four flours that I have mentioned it to you. Another thing with gluten-free flour, it is so fine, very fine. You look at it, I just touched it. And then all of a sudden, it's getting stuck on my fingers. So we see that gluten-free flour is very different from this other flour. Now, another thing is that someone may ask me, what is gluten? Now, gluten is a protein that is found in any food or substance or grain. Now, this flour does not contain any gluten. However, when you're baking with this flour, you need to add another raising agent to make it hold together so that you get a good product. Now, we've seen that flour is the basis of our baking. Now, as you continue baking, you may encounter other condition, and I've noticed that many people, not all of it, but a few that I've met, they have celiac. Is an autoimmune disorder in which your immune system responds abnormally to gluten. So now, if you find people who are celiac, one thing you have to remember is that when you are baking, you use gluten-free flour, because we want to make sure they get the best of the results, or they get the best of what they are asking for. So we need to use gluten-free flour. Now, one thing with celiac is that any trace of gluten in any product they eat or taste, they will definitely react. They'll either vomit or diarrhea. So to avoid that, please consider this kind of people when we are baking. So now we've seen that flour is not just flour, but flour play a big role when we are serving our customer best. For us to serve our customer best, it's good for us to learn what kind of allergies they have, what kind of condition they have. Are they gluten intolerant or are they gluten insensitive? So knowing that, we'll be able to serve them better. And some, it's just a temporary condition that they will be able to overcome. Some, it's something that they've had for years. So knowing each one of our clients, will be able to serve them better. And we've seen that all these flour, as much as they are flour, they play a different role. So if you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. If you have any question, I would like to answer you. However, maybe as viewers, you have questions that you've been wondering. Would you like to get some answer? I would like to answer you. So leave the question below and I'll get back to you, and then we can discuss